Welcome to Nerdcultuur, and yes, today we are doing the show in English thanks to the great response I received to my RRR review. And as promised, I would be delving into more Bollywood and Tollywood movies, and I believe this one, Prithviraj, is actually a Bollywood movie. And this movie was actually released here as Prithviraj, but in some countries it's called Samrat Prithviraj. And this movie is actually based on a poem, so it's something I'm not as familiar with, but it may be more popular within India. But there was a bit of controversy around this movie because apparently it's going up against Major, which is also a very big film in India right now. And that one has a more personal and sensitive story that's actually quite important to a lot of people in India, but it's not playing here in Holland right now, but I'll keep an eye out for it. Maybe sometime soon it will release here as well. But I'm assuming Prithviraj is actually like an historical hero, and the way he is portrayed in this movie, he's kind of flawless in a way. And that right there is one of the biggest issues I actually have with this movie, because he is as a main character quite distant, because he almost doesn't feel human. He's like supposed to be the manliest man around, and he's super strong, and he leads the army, and he's progressive, and he's basically like a perfect leader. But just within all of his interactions, I found him to be quite bland, and it's not even that I'm blaming the actor. I think it's kind of the way he's been directed. Thank God he at least has a phenomenal mustache that really carries his personality. That's probably about 80% of the reason I like him. Now, to be fair, he does have a really cool uncle that's also kind of like his advisor, and he does steal a lot of the scenes within this movie. And then of course there's his wife, who's named Sanyukta, and I actually really did fall in love with her as well. And who can blame me when she's played by Mamushi Chilar, and I probably butchered her name, but she's a former Miss India and even a Miss World. So yes, I would also fight Indian tribes and Afghan armies if it meant she could be my princess someday. And of course I'm very new to Bollywood movies, but just like RRR, this movie does have a pretty big scale, maybe not as big as RRR did. It's also not as creative with its cinematography and the locations and the way it's shot. Like especially during battle scenes, it really does rely heavily on slow motion and just a lot of effects and style of fighting that's been done a lot in movies and that we've seen a lot before. But at least so far in all of the Bollywood movies or Tollywood movies I've experienced so far, there's a lot of joy in them and just a lot of energy. And it really does help that it's also colorful and they're wearing these amazing costumes and their choreography is really on point. Especially for the song they have that's actually named after our main character. That one was really stuck in my head and quite catchy. And while the scale of this movie wasn't as big as RRR's, I do have to say the special effects they used for the animals were actually quite a bit better. That was one of the few negatives I forgot to mention in my RRR review for that movie, that the special effects were a little bit not quite up to par. And the same could be said for the English actors in that movie, but there's no English actors in this movie. It's mostly just Indian and Afghan people, because I do believe that's actually rooted in reality, that there was this war between Afghanistan and their leaders and some tribes within India. And I did find it quite funny that they opened this movie with like a disclaimer about not wanting to portray negative stereotypes, but I think they did a good job of making it fair and balanced, because not only were the Afghans bad people, also within India itself there were quite a few bad tribes. It's like the only person that's actually perfect in this movie is Prithviraj himself, because there's a bit of a feminist undertone to him as well, which I quite appreciated, because this is more of an old school type feminism, because he actually allowed his wife to rule alongside him and sit beside him and make decisions. So it's kind of cool to see that in India they still promote women empowerment, because here in the West it seems that some people don't even know what a woman is anymore. I think this movie kind of front loaded a lot of their songs. At some point I feel there's a big stretch of probably about an hour where there's no singing and it's mostly just drama and action. And I did think this movie was paced quite well, because it's also not as long as RRR is. This one is a little bit over 2 hours. And I do kind of feel I'm missing a lot more context, like historically and culturally, with this movie for certain like rituals or traditions that I didn't quite understand fully. And that's also why I said RRR was such an accessible film. Just as a Western person who's not familiar with Bollywood or Tollywood movies at all, that was a really good one to start with. But I did think this movie was also still pretty cool. It's not nearly as good as RRR of course, but it's still quite enjoyable. Even if it's just mostly for production value, the scale, and of course Prithviraj's wife. But yeah, I intend to review some more Indian movies soon. A lot of people were recommending Bahubali to me, and Iga also sounds quite cool. But I'll also be looking out for other Indian movies when they start playing in theaters here as well, so I can review some more. But let me know if there's any other movies coming up that you're really excited for that's coming out soon. Thanks for watching my review and subscribe to keep up to date with everything going on in Nerdcultuur.